Good afternoon, Richard. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Mark. How are you?
Good. Great to have you on here. I'm here with Richard Bell of Bell Alliance. Richard, maybe you can just do a quick introduction of what you do and what your firm's all about.
Yeah, so I have a firm of about 45 folks. We run a very large real estate conveyancing practice. And Mark, you can tell by the color of my hair, I've been doing this for a little while.
At least you've got hair,
we run the
Richard.
largest residential. I was wondering whether you were going to go with that line, Mark. So we run the largest conveyancing practice in the city of Vancouver.
Excellent. So the reason I wanted to get you on today, Richard, obviously it's no surprise this 15% foreign buyer tax. Poor introduction came in August 2nd, and I know you're kind of right in the trenches, and I wanted to know a little bit about if you're seeing deals falling apart, what if any legal ramifications there may be. So maybe you can just kind of give me an insight of what you're seeing.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of disruption because of this. And I guess, Mark, if you don't mind, I just want to step back and see what I saw as sort of the two major issues around the introduction of this tax, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So one of the big ones, of course, was the failure to grandfather. So you had all these folks that had entered into contracts. And normally when someone goes to buy something, these foreign nationals are actually people we have up here helping on cancer research and technology and all that. You tend to sort of buy to what the maximum you can afford. And so when this tax came in and people who had existing contracts were stuck paying that tax, in many instances, they simply did not have the money. Plus, it simply wasn't fair. It's so non-Canadian to do that. And then when you look at the other issue, which is we invite folks to come here because we have shortages. We're one of the top cancer research facilities in the world. If you look at who's there, we have a lot of foreign nationals there. We look at the tech sector. We're trying to build the economy. We have to reach out. And so it hardly seems fair to say, gee, come here and work for us and on a 2-year work permit or whatever it is, and then say, oh, by the way, we're actually going to charge you more than everybody else to be able to buy a property here. So those are the two areas. Now, in terms of the impact, it's been pretty significant.
So just to step back a minute, I think one of the issues is a lot of people paint that single picture. They're thinking it's a guy who lives in China. He comes here once, flies in on a plane, does a 2-week flyby, and purchase a property. I think what you're talking about, people don't realize this is quite impactful. There's people here that we've invited that are helping the economy or helping, like you say, research, and yet they're the ones that are feeling the blunt. But I think everybody's kind of just lumping everybody into that one, oh, it's okay because the guy lives in China and whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think when this was first introduced, the response in the marketplace was, oh, fabulous, fabulous. But right. I expect almost everybody now has known somebody who's been negatively impacted this. It's somewhat sort of ironic that the new city planner for the city of Vancouver is a foreign national. The new CEO of TransLink is a foreign national. You can just go on and on and on. You had a young fellow from CBC who was just sort of a month or so away from getting his permanent residency, and yet he was stuck paying the 15% tax. So I think what you've identified is absolutely true. Most of the foreign nationals are not people coming from China.
Right.
They're visible within the media because it's the top end of the market, which quite frankly is a very small portion of the market.
Right. Now, did you see deals falling apart? And if so, what are they? Obviously, someone's putting a deposit there and they're deciding, okay, do I want to lose my deposit or do I want to come up with the additional 15%? And I mean, what were you seeing?
Yeah, so we are seeing some deals collapse. And what's interesting is that many of them are just local people who have been impacted. One example that we had was a older lady in her early 80s. She entered into a contract to sell her property and then, of course, turned around and entered into a contract to buy another property. Her buyer failed to close.
Right.
Therefore, she couldn't close on her purchase. So what was the outcome of that? Little old lady wrote a check for $100,000 to be released from her obligation to buy, which quite frankly was probably a really good deal because what was that $3 or $4 million house worth in a market that just got slammed by this 15%? I mean, the market was slowing down. You and I both know the market had changed, but this was a hammer that just caused significant impact to the overall market. 15%, as I say, we've had situations where clients have come up with the 15%, but they're very upset about that. And then we've had situations where instead of paying the 15%, they said, you know what, we're just not going to close, and so lawsuits fall.
So are you seeing any ways around this? Like, are people saying, okay, well, I'll put it in my son's name or relative's name, or, you know, like that straw buyer kind of scenario that we used to see, or not really?
So the legislation has a very, very broad anti-avoidance provision in it. And so I think it's one thing, you know, if it's a new construction and that foreign national does an arm's length assignment to a buyer, that's probably not caught by anti-avoidance. But the question becomes is if, mom and dad are foreign nationals and they decide to close in the daughter's name, well, is it really the daughter's property, or is it in fact going into her name simply to avoid the legislation? Now, it's anti-avoidance.
Was this right across the board with pre-builts as well?
Well, yeah, pre-sales are not grandfathered. Nothing was grandfathered. Okay. So you've got projects in this city, and there's more fallout to come, where you may have had 35% of the project sold to foreign nationals. You know, they're buying investment properties here, which, by the way, is probably contributing to some rental stock. Investors don't leave these units sitting empty. So it's a real challenge to the development community. Yeah,
potentially a developer. I mean, if we see the market in the condo side of things drop, say 15%, a 15% tax, it may be flat out. Would you say to walk, or what do you think?
So one of the analysis is if somebody bought something on a pre-sale 2 years ago, and it's going to close next year, the increase in value may offset that 15% tax. And so again, I don't think the world is falling apart here. The sky's not falling apart. But there is these short-term impacts. Now, as you are aware, there's been a class action lawsuit, which I think is a really interesting opportunity potentially for force the government to revisit this. I mean, if you think of an agreement like NAFTA, and we've got lots and lots of these treaty agreements, but under NAFTA, there's certain skills of professionals and skilled workers who are entitled to move between the countries freely for work. So and that's a federal legislation. So you have a provincial legislation now that penalizes the people that are allowed to come here under a national treaty. So is in fact this legislation what's called ultra vires the province. In other words, it's beyond their jurisdiction. So that's really what the class action lawsuit is all about. And quite frankly, personally, I hope they're successful because I think we need these skilled workers that we're bringing into Canada.
Well, and I think not only that, it's the fact that it was given a date and nothing was grandfathered. I think you're going to agree with me that that's the most unfair part about it. I mean, at the end of the day, if they're going to say, yes, there's a 15% foreign buyer tax, at least give the people an opportunity to say, okay, I don't want to buy that then. And, they can walk without losing anything.
I think, any reasonable person, Mark, would agree 100% with that statement. It's just, as I said earlier, it just seems so un-Canadian to penalize people that had legally binding obligations. I had one family where the baby's Canadian because he's up here working on a massive infrastructure project for the provincial government.
Wow.
And he was fortunate is that he was able to cancel or cash in some of his retirement plan in order to pay
the additional 15%
tax, surely that's not what should have happened.
So I guess at the end of the day, we're just going to have to wait it out and see where things kind of fall.
Yeah, I think so, Mark. And, again, it's Vancouver. It's the Lower Mainland. People will continue to come here. But it's that unfairness. And I think, is that cancer researcher going to come to Vancouver or Toronto?
Exactly. Well, Richard, I appreciate you coming on today. It's been insightful, a lot of good information. Maybe we'll touch base about this in a couple of months and see where we've gone from there.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Mark.
Excellent. Thanks, Richard.